Allie with Potomac Beads. Join me in learning how to do this fun mixed media Blue Jay pendant. If you need any supplies, check the links below to shop with us online. So to begin our Blue Jay pendant, I have here my triangle forms in the 13, 14 millimeter. It's honestly really not going to matter. And we are going to start by making our formation for our cabochon to sit on top of. What I have here are some Delicas, and I'm using the Opaque blue gray luster. And then I have some 15Os in my turquoise color. Both are the Miyuki brand. One is a Delica, one is a regular 15O bead. I have my 6 surfaces here, and I have some 0.006 wildfire beading thread, and currently a size 10 needle on my thread. What we're going to begin with is we are going to begin with brick stitch around the entire outer edge, which is going to hold that formation together. I'm going to begin by picking up one of my triangles, and again I have about 4 feet of thread, and I'm going to tie a knot around the triangles. 2 times right over left and then left over right. From here I'm going to begin my brick stitch. Now I'm going to begin brick stitch, and I'm going to put on, to start with, one Delica, one 15O, and another Delica. I'm going to let that fall to the outside of my form. I'm going to sew through my form, kind of pinch the beads towards the top of the form, and I'm going to sew back up through, so from the outside between beads 2 and 3, back up through my second Delica bead. Push that little bead kind of down there and push these together. We're going to want the 15Os to sit right on the top in between our Delicas. From here, you're going to continue with brick stitch, adding one 15O, one Delica, so from the back of the form to the front of the form, and then back up through just the Delica. Again, sewing from the bottom, basically the exterior, to the top. And you can see now, after you do one formation, how much nicer that 15O is going to lay on there. And I'm just going to move this back a tiny bit, squashing it down, add a 15, a Delica, sew through, pinching those beads to the exterior, and then back up through that 11O bead. When I'm coming between the 15 and the 11O and I sew back through there, it sets up my Delica to sit perfectly in a brick stitch line right there at the top of the formation. You're going to continue this the whole length of this one triangle, and then I'm going to show you how we do the gap between the next one, so how we continue in that formation to keep it going. So again, I add them in, sew under, sew back through that 11, and then push them next to one another, so the 15s work to just decorate that outer edge. When you get to the end of your row on your triangle, what you're going to do is add 3 15s and then your Delica, and then we're going to scoot from one form to the other. I've already done it from form 1 to 2, and now I'm going to grab form number 3, hold it in that triangular shape, add in 3 15s to my needle. I let those drop down next to my frame, and then I'm going to pick up my next Delica and continue on, adding on the Delica just like I've been doing, and then my lucky number is 8, so I'm going to do this 8 Delicas are going to be along the base of my triangle. So there, I push that up, go through the Delica from the bottom towards the top so that it sits on the brick stitch, and those 3 beads just act to kind of decorate that outer edge. Continue on then, adding 1 15, 1 Delica, and continuing on to get that nice consistent line of our brick stitch through the form, pinch the beads there, and then go back up through the Delicas, coming out between the 15 and the Delica. Push it against the last one and have them line up nicely right next to one another. Continue on till you have all of your forms on, so you have your nice formation, and then I'll show you how we are going to attach the back, or the first one, to the 6th one. That way we close up that gap. Once you have the formation almost done, you can see it's kind of sit out, so don't worry about that if you're holding it and you're not like pinching it together. This is the point where we draw it together. Then when we attach our cabochon to the top, that's going to hold the centers. So what we're going to do from the last, so from our 8th Delica on this last 6th form, I'm going to pick up 1, 2, and 3 of my 15s. And then what I'm going to do is go over to bead number 1 on our first row here, and I'm going to sew down bead number 1. I'm going to sew down through the formation, and then back up through that same bead number 1. That's going to pull this nice and tight and make it almost kind of like building blocks, that when you're looking at them, and they'll naturally form one way, so just make sure you can have the thread going different ways, but just make sure to kind of keep it that same way. There I have that total formation now done, and what we're going to do is we're going to sew around the outer edge. So to sew around the outer edge, I'm going to go through the 15 at the top of that first Delica that my thread is coming out of, pick up a 15, and sew through the 15 that's already there. Pick up a 15, sew through the 15 that's already there. Another 15, sew through. So you're continuing this along the side because I want a solid blue line. And then once you have that solid blue line in there, it will also help your Delicas to sit really, really nicely. So as I go in here and add a blue between each, it's going to force those Delicas to sit kind of perfectly. As I come into the corner here, so I'm at the corner of my section, I'm going to add 1 15 and then sew through all 3 15s that you have, or sorry, the first 15 that you have there, and then skip the middle 15 and sew through the third 15. What that's going to do is pull it into a little bit more of a point, so kind of squish that together like it would be, and then pull your thread, which should take that center 15 and let it kind of just pop to the top. From here then, I'm going to continue on adding in my 15s the whole way along the piece. Sorry for being off the top there. Go ahead then and add your 15 between each of your beads the whole way along. Again, when you get to the next corner, sew through bead number 1 and bead number 3 to make that sit up a little bit into an actual cornered shape. When you get back to the beginning of the form, after adding in all of your 15-0s, you're going to sew through that first 15-0 that you started with. Pull nice and tight, and that's going to force all your triangles to sit towards the interior there. You have a nice edge then of the 15-0s right above the Delicas, and again it helps to sit that out. Once we get our cabochon in, then we won't have to worry about that outer exterior side going. So we're going to go in, we're going to decorate the outside of the cab, and then I'm going to show you how we are going to go in and hang the tassel as well. So to begin the next step, we are going to begin bezeling our 12mm cabochon, and this is a turquoise 12mm cab, and I have a size 12 needle attached to another strand of the .006 wildfire beading thread, and I have strung 32 of my Delica beads. I'm going to simply then tie a knot to do my bezel. I'm going to do right over left and then left over right, making sure your seed beads do not go into the knot. Give a nice tight pull. And if you need to, you can grab your pliers to do so. And once you have that tight pull then, what you're going to do is take your needle and thread, and I'm going to sew up about 3 beads, say. This is going to help to get my starter thread, basically for my peyote bezel, to be away from that knot. I'm going to go through now and add 1 bead, skip a bead, and sew through the next bead. If you have trouble with this and you're not super familiar with making a seed bead bezel, definitely check out that video, Bezeling a Rivoli. or a cabochon. So you're going to end up with 2, 1, 2, 1. And that pattern is going to continue the whole way around till you add a total of 16 new beads. So you're going to get that stair step. So you're going to continue around the whole way till you get 16 new beads on there. And then I'm going to show you how we step up to start using some of our 15-ohs. When the last bead goes on and you're going through that first delica that your thread was coming out of, I also want you to step up into the first bead that you put on in that row of peyote. Once you have those 16 beads on, we're going to do 2 rows of our 15-ohs in our gold color. So this is the champagne color. And we're going to do 2 rows of those to hold in the back, and then we're going to do the same in the front. So I'm going to pick up one of my champagne and sew through the next bead already in line. Going around completely then, you're just adding 1 15, sewing through the next delica, and so on. So you're going to be adding 16 of the delicas here. And then when you get back around to the start here, you're going to sew through your last delica and then step up through your delica in the 15. Once you have 2 rows on also, you'll start to realize that you're pulling really tightly because you want it to get trapped inside the back here of a bezel. So I have here one that I've already done 2 rows of, and I'm going to switch now from doing the back to the front of this bezel. To do so, I've already done 2 rows of my 15-ohs, magic, and then I'm going to sew back down through the project. So I'm going to sew down through the next 15-oh that is downward, then I'm going to sew through a delica, then I'm going to sew through the next delica, and then I'm going to sew through yet the next delica. What this is doing is bringing the thread to the front of the piece here, so that way I can do the exact same to the front as I did to the back, casing in my delica or my bezel for it. So I'm going to go around twice now and put in, just like I did the back, put in 2 rows of 15, adding a 15, sewing through the peyote. Once I'm done with these 6 15s, again I'm going to step up through that one there and continue on. Just a reminder again, if you do need help with the bezel, make sure to check out that bezel video. Do 2 more rows to the top here, and then we're going to work on expanding our bezel towards the exterior and then attaching it to our form. As you're finishing sewing up the front of the bezel, I have 1 more 15-oh to go on. I'm going to sew through my first 15, just like I did on the back side as well, and then up through the first 15 in this second row. Give a nice tight pull. And you can see it fits the cabochon perfectly. Now if you want to, remember we tied a knot, so I'm actually going to go in with my thread zap or my thread burner and burn down that thread right there. That way, by the time I add the seed beads, you won't see it and it's out of the way. From here now we're going to get to the exterior basically of the cab. And what I'm going to do is sew down then into the next 15 in line. And then I'm going to sew down through the first delica, and I'm going to sew down through the second delica. Where I want you to be coming out and getting ready to add more of your beads is in that second independent delica that sits by itself with your thread coming out there. Now what we're going to do is add some color to the exterior side. So I'm coming out of that first delica. I want you to add a series of 7 15-ohs onto your needle. Now this pattern can change up. You can have some variety, add some crystals, add some bling, whatever you want to the exterior. I'm going to then skip over my next center delica, and I'm sewing through the third one in line. That adds that nice little archway. Again, 2 of my gold delicas. Then I'm going to grab 3 of my blue, 2 of my gold, and then once you have those on your thread and needle, you're going to bring it down onto your project, skip the next delica in line, and sew through the next one along that center line. So we're always going along the center line to continue to get kind of that eye of our blue jay. When you come back around and you're finishing up that blue jay eye, you are going to end up back at the starting delica that you started to go around. We're going to continue to expand this and then get ready to attach it to our backing. So to the exterior, in order to get these sharper edges, what I want you to do after coming out of the delica is sew up into the top 3 seed beads. When you're in the top 3 seed beads, just like we did previously to create that little picot there, you're going to, when you're down through the 15s, you're going to add one more delica, sew up through those 2 gold 15s, push that delica towards kind of the top of the project, sew through the first blue 15 here on the project. Do not sew through the second, and sew through the third. Down through then my 2 gold beads as well, and out. As I do that and continue around the project, you can see I've already done a couple. It creates a nice point that's going to mimic the points of our triangle. Also, that delica there is going to be awesome for us to attach to. So you're adding a delica, sewing up through both golds, the first blue and the third blue. If you happen to get the same that is going through that top blue, just sew it out. And you're good then to kind of tuck it down below and sew through the others to get around to the other side. So you're going the whole way along the piece, creating those nice little peaks and adding in the little delica bead. Once you're done going along and making your little points, what I want you to do is after you finish up, bring your thread and needle down so it's hanging out in the first row of delicas along the back. So we just went through the center row of the delicas. I want you to go to the first one towards the back, right near the 15 O's. Bringing your thread and needle out there, we're then going to attach it to our little wheel here that we've created. What we're going to do to attach it is we are going to sew over portions of the wheel and go in and go into this first row of the delicas while doing so. Now if you want to make it easier, you could have tied the wheels a little bit together. I'm going to hold them together as I'm actually sewing on to the surface. So here's the front look. You're going to actually pull your thread and needle to the back of the design, through the form. Coming out then, right along the side here, you're going to pick up your first 2 rings, and you can add seed beads if you want. I'm going to keep it really easy and just go through my next first delica. So I've gone over top of the ring, and then just through that next same delica bead. What that's going to do is it's going to put one simple little thread connecting along the back there. I'm going to sew through my delicas, and when I come out, I'll just add a little blue just for the decoration for the back. You won't really see it. Come out of the delica there from row number 1. Just adds a little blue so you don't see any thread. Coming out then, I'll add one more of my 15 in the blue. Go through my next delica, and when you're holding it, you can kind of see like, oh yeah, I'm right on top of one of those forms of triangles. So I'm going through here, going through that delica. I'm right there on top of one, so I'm going to take my thread and needle and make sure I'm going over top of those. So here I have then my next little triangles in line. I'm going to sew over the top of the triangles. And again, if you want to, you can go in and you can add some seed beads over it. It doesn't bother me that I'm going to see a little bit of thread. I'm going to sew into then, after the threads are on top, I'm sewing into the next delica. Getting that other stop bead, that's connected to the wheel still out of the way. There you can see I have 2 sections where I've connected to, and you want them to connect without being over top of one another. Again, I'm going to go in here and kind of scoot my needle and thread back into the triangle I'm currently working on. I'm going to add a 15, sew into the next delica in this row, and just one. It always kind of wants to sew through the next one. Just push it up like that, so that way, off the top there, push it up like that so that way you can sew into that area. Bring your thread then to the back into the triangle that you're currently working on. Hop over that triangle and into the next delica in line. If you need to, you can kind of wiggle this to go through just that one Delica. There we go. And then out. It's going to be a game as you kind of create and attach to the formation that your needle might come out towards the front somewhere. Just bring it back towards the back. And then continue on. As I bring it to the back, you're going to continue on sewing into your Delicas, sewing across the top until all of those little sections of triangles are sewed down. So again, going into the Delicas, adding in a couple little beads if you want. They're hidden in the back, doesn't matter. But we're going to sew in so that way those points of those triangles are all staying the same. So once you get to a point where you say, oh, I'm ready to go over the top, my thread and needle are here, you go over the top and tuck into that next first row of Delicas. If you want to do the row of 15s in the middle, you can also do that too. You're not limited to just the Delica roll or the Delica row. That's up to you. I just find that the easiest because they have a larger hole. And there I have it. So you can see it's starting to really hold it down and form, and you're not going to see any of that when you flip it over to the front. You get to the point then where you have your thread connecting all your triangles right along the back there, and then you're going to flip over to the front. What I'm going to do, I have this thread that's already attached here to my exterior form, and I'm going to use that to attach my tassel and then also to do my bail at the top. So this middle thread that worked to attach my Rivoli there to the center of my formation, I'm going to get rid of. I'm going to flip it back over, going along the back here. I'm going to sew through the form and over. Bring it back over to the starter side for just a little bit added protection. Then I'm going to sew into one of my next beads along the baseline here. Again, you won't see it, so I'm just literally getting rid of my thread. I'm going to sew through a couple different portions, back the thread out certain ways, and then tie off the thread through one of the bridge threads, sewing underneath that 11-0 right there, that 15-0. There's really not a scientific way. I mean, I skipped over every other Delica when I was attaching to the sides, but there's really not a scientific way how you need to attach to the formations. If you want to, you can even glue, or you can do some stiff stuff right there to go on top of and to have that be in the formation. Whatever works for you, you want to think about it kind of as like sewing a button on, that you're making sure that it goes over both of those frames and then it holds it nice and solid as you finish up. I'm going to go ahead now, after tying this thread, get rid of the one that is attached to the center piece by using your thread burner. Remember that you can do this with different formations as well. And also, if you don't like the formation, again, just do the little Blue Jay eye. Once I have that there, I'm going to flip over to the front, pick up the thread that is currently attached to the front here. And what I want to do is get to one of these corners. So I'm going to sew back through my beads wherever I need to in order to get to one of the corners. When I'm at the corner at one top, you can do a bail, you can do a individual bead before. It's kind of up to you how you want it to look. And if you do want to attach the tassel to it, it is not required, it is optional. So I'm coming out one of those corner point beads here. I'll grab my tassel, and I'm using one of the blue morning turquoise tassel to go with it. And I'm going to get ready to attach my tassel here to the bottom. To attach my tassel to the bottom, I am going to go in here and create a loop. I have one of my Delica beads. Then I'm going to do several, kind of cleaning up my bead mat of my 15-0 seed beads in that champagne color. And two more. And then what I'm going to do is sew through the tassel and back through the Delica. Sewing through the tassel. Those seed beads will sit inside of it. I'm going to sew back through the Delica. And then when I go into the 15-0 that my thread is coming out of, I want to make sure I go into the opposite side. What this is going to do is have it so that the Delica sits in the middle then to hold on my tassel there right at the bottom. From here, I'm going to go back around all of these seed beads along the outer edge. If you want to, you can reinforce and drop another piece of thread in here. I'm just going to sew right along this outer line here of all of these seed beads that I created, and usually you can kind of go right through those. I'm going to go the whole way now to the top of the design to be able to create my bail, which is going to sit at the opposite corner of my tassel. Once you get to the top of the piece, we need to create the bail. And I did go around the whole exterior here. When I got to the corners, I did not go through that corner bead because remember, we want that to be a nice cornered piece. I'm going to drop out a couple more of my Delica colors. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick up 2 of my Delicas. I'm then going to sew back through from the opposite side that corner bead that I'm going through. That forces 2 Delicas to lay right on top of one another. Go ahead in and go back up through that first bead, add 2 more beads, and sew through that bottom bead again. That creates a little bit of a herringbone look there for the start of the bail. What I'm going to do then is sew through that 15-0 one more time. I'm going back up through the 2 seed beads there on the right hand side, back through those 2 Delicas and out. What I'm going to do now is grab my wire guard or my wire protector if you want to, or you can grab a jump ring or a split ring. It's kind of up to you how you're going to attach there. But I'm going to attach mine as a long medallion on a piece of chain to hang down a little bit further. And if you want to, you can actually attach this right to an actual link of chain, sewing through the link of chain. I'm going to be adding a wire guard or a wire protector. And if you're unfamiliar with them, they work really, really well to guard the thread. And so I have a little gold one there that's going to match my triangles. Coming out that 11-0 Delica, I'm going to sew up through one side of my wire guard. I'm going to sew down the other side of the wire guard and then down through the 2 beads on the left hand side. Now because this is where my clasp is, or my chain is going to attach, I'm going to sew through that 15-0 bead one more time. And I'm going to reinforce doing the exact same thing, going back up through those 2 Delicas, through my wire guard or wire protector, down through the other side, and down through the Delicas. Now one nice thing that I can do with my chain here is I could have, if I wanted to, connected chain to either side here and had it coming off the corners. You could have done that. It's kind of up to you where you want to attach it. I'm going to one more time go through that 15, kind of wiggle through there, and then I'm going to bring my thread and needle down a little bit and tie it off and burn it off to the side. So going through there, get my thread through, and I'm going to tie off down along the pendant, and then your design is finished in this beautiful look of this medallion to hang down nice and low. Thanks so much for watching me in making this fun Blue Jay pendant. Remember, this is a design idea. You can really take it and make it your own, hang down from ovals, include the triangles together, use some rectangles, and think about incorporating the design ideas of bezeling a cab onto a mixed media project and sewing it onto some of those formations. You can have tons of fun adding fringe and all different design elements. Remember, if you do need any materials, check out the links below to shop with us online. Also, you can comment as well as share the video. If you have not, go ahead and hit that little link in the corner to make sure that you subscribe to get regular updates from us here at Potomac Beads. Thanks so much for watching this Blue Jay pendant, and hopefully it taught you a lot of different ideas and is a springboard for your creativity.